Hello! So, I was just going to talk about some of the things that I do to deal with stress and anxiety. And I think stress and anxiety comes to all of us at some point in our life where we have to deal with these very anxious, kind of feeling a bit on the edge feelings. And it comes to all of us at some point. Um, and I think one of the first things to do to deal with anxiety is to accept the anxiety. You have to accept that you will have those feelings and that it's absolutely normal to feel anxious. It's basically your body doing its job. It's our inner kind of alarm, and 9 times out of 10, it's a false alarm. You know, you're not being chased by a tiger. You know, you're just a little bit stressed out. So the first thing I would say is to accept the anxiety, and just to say to yourself, okay, I accept these anxious thoughts. I accept these anxious feelings. That's okay. And once you accept it, I think that's a very important first step for dealing with anxiety. Um, I spoke about in my other video about meditation. I would say meditation is my kind of number one way that I deal with anxious feelings. But there are some other hacks as well that I think are worth talking about. And these are things that have worked for me. Personally, I haven't gone down the drugs route. I know a lot of people take things like ashwagandha, they take L-theanine, they take CBD oil. Personally, I have tried all those things for stress and anxiety. And for me personally, it didn't really work. It's almost worse, the withdrawal symptoms. So I feel okay, pretty chilled, and then I get this kind of withdrawal. So it doesn't really work for me. That for me, I'd rather focus on physiological ways of dealing with it. So yeah, the first thing is accept the anxiety. Accept that anxiety is totally normal. Don't resist it. Just say, okay, I'm feeling a bit anxious. That's okay. This happens. The second thing to do, which is what I do, and I would recommend this to everyone, is cold water immersion. So it's been proven in so many studies that this it basically elicits a fight or flight response, and then from that you develop a kind of adaptation to the cold, which reduces the stress response. And if you continually do it, you find that you are more and more relaxed, and it really does switch on that parasympathetic nervous system. So what I do is I'll have a cold bath 2 or 3 times a week. I also live near the sea, so I will go in the sea a couple of times a week, hopefully. If I'm feeling really, really anxious, I might go in the sea every day, and it really does help. It just kind of reduces that stress response and just makes you feel literally chilled, but throughout the day, you just feel like those stress triggers aren't quite as triggering. So I would definitely recommend cold water immersion. It's something that I've really, really used. 3 minutes. It doesn't need to be very long. It's just 3 minutes in a cold bath. Believe me, when you first start, it's pretty horrific. And you're like, why am I doing this? But you keep doing it, and it really, really does work for stress. I would just recommend it for everyone. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm scared of the cold," but face it. Part of facing the fear is part of the kind of process of dealing with those anxious feelings. So obviously go slow when you first do it. You don't want to go into cold water shock. You have to go slowly. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years probably. So yeah, have a go at cold water immersion. You'll be surprised at the physiological response in your body. It also helps you sleep better. I find that if I have cold baths, I really do sleep a lot better, which again helps with those stressful feelings. The second thing I would say to do if you are feeling quite stressed and anxious, and this is something that I do, is breath work. So there are different breath work techniques, but basically connecting with the breath obviously connects with your vagus nerve. It's a way of improving that vagal tone and your control of that relaxation response. So there are different breath works you can do. I try and do 10 minutes of breath work a day. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. And I often do this when I'm driving. I don't know if that's particularly advised by some people, but for me, I find it a very nice way of driving along and I can do some breath work. I'm not a massive fan of Wim Hof. I know people love Wim Hof, and I have tried it, and I think it's great under circumstances. However, for me, and I think potentially for other people, hyperventilation, where you're breathing, is not necessarily great if you are feeling quite stressed and anxious. For me, it kind of heightens the stress response. And I know other people it does as well, but I know for a lot of people it works, and that's fantastic. But just for me personally, Wim Hof actually makes stress, I actually feel a bit more stressed. So I prefer more kind of gentle breathing techniques that really focus on a really long exhale. So my favourite is 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and then you exhale for 8. And if you can do that for 10-20 minutes, believe me, you will feel so much more chilled out, and it really does switch on that parasympathetic nervous system, and you can really feel it. And if you do that every day, you will find that your digestion improves, your sleep improves, and that stress response is more dull, that you're not getting triggered by things. So yeah, I definitely recommend 4-7-8 breathing to you. Do some research about it. I won't discuss it all and explain it to you. But 4-7-8 breathing is very, very good. The other one I would recommend, which I've only just recently discovered, but it's a very good technique, is Buteyko breathing. Buteyko. And this is where you breathe very, very lightly. It's focusing on actually breathing a little bit less. And it's breathing through the nose. And it's basically where you're breathing lightly, and you can almost imagine a feather beneath your nose, because you're breathing so lightly. And it's a very subtle technique, but it's one I would recommend. So do some research about Buteyko breathing lightly. If you can do that for 5-10 minutes before something stressful, or after you're feeling a bit stressed, I would definitely recommend Buteyko breathing. It's something that's really worked for me. The third thing, well, I don't know if this is the third or fourth, but the other thing I would recommend if you are feeling stressed and anxious is to really reduce your mobile phone usage. I find a mobile phone is an extremely triggering thing, whether it's social media alerts, notifications, being on social media. I don't think it's very, very good if you are feeling a bit, jittery and a bit on the edge. So what I personally do is I switch my phone off pretty much every day, about 7:30 at night. Sometimes it's earlier, but I'll also have days where I'm only on my phone, a couple of times, and I'm not checking it. And I just think that by reducing usage of your mobile phone, you're just giving your brain a little bit of a break from this information highway, which we constantly have, constant information notifications, WhatsApp messages, emails, whatever it is, but that is all triggering for your brain. And the bad thing about mobile phones, obviously mobile phones have lots of uses, social media, it's great when it's great. But having all these messages, it really does drill down into the primitive part of your brain, the hypothalamus, the kind of those dopamine receptors in the primitive part of the brain that really isn't great for you, especially if you are feeling a bit anxious. So reduce mobile phone usage. It's absolutely key, and it's something that I found really, really helpful. The next thing I would say which is kind of tied with the reducing mobile phone usage, is to read. Read a book. So what I do every day is I will read. At the moment, I'm reading Charles Dickens or Oliver Twist, but I will read a book every day for at least 20 minutes. It can be half an hour. I'd like to do more. It can be, an hour. But every morning when I wake up, as I'm having my breakfast, I will read a book, and that is such a good start to the day, and it develops focus and attention in a way that going straight on your mobile phone doesn't, and it really switches on this part of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational, logical thinking part of your brain. It's the part of the brain that actually makes us human. And so, yeah, my advice is do not switch that phone on first thing. Read a book, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, and you'll find that it's a gentle start to the day, and it's a really good way of just switching on your brain and switching on the right neurons to have a really positive, happy day. So, yeah, those two things: reduce mobile phone and read books. And if you can, read old-fashioned books in print. It's good to get away from screens. Very, very important. Last but not least, in terms of reducing stress and anxiety, and this is something that I do, and I know lots of people do, but it is to connect with nature. It's a very simple thing. And when I say connect with nature, for me, I just mean go for a walk in a natural space. It can be a local park. For me here, it's the seafront and the park as well, or I might go for a walk in the woods. But go into a natural space and connect with nature in the sense of using your senses, using your sight, your hearing, your smell, your sense of touch. Taste is a little bit more difficult, but using those senses to connect with nature. Listen to the birds singing. Maybe touch the trunk of a tree. Be aware of the atmosphere. Be aware of this. Look up at the sky. Look up. Look at the stars. Go out for a walk and connect with nature and get into the natural environment. It is so healing for the brain, and it really, really does reduce stress and anxiety. So, yeah, it's probably, out of all the things I've mentioned, in some ways it's probably the most powerful thing as a human being, just to go into a natural space, use your senses, put the mobile phone away, and just be with nature. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. It can just be going to your local park. But yeah, a very, very powerful tool. So yeah, those are some of my kind of life hacks for dealing with stress and anxiety. There are so many different ways of dealing with it, but unfortunately, in some modern society, it's a lot of us are dealing with stress and anxiety, and it's something that we have to kind of deal with, accept that it's normal, and kind of move on and find ways to deal with it. So it's something not to be scared of. I think that's the main thing about stress and anxiety. Just accept that we all get stressed and anxious, and it's part of life. But there's some really, really good ways of dealing with it. And hopefully you've gained some insight today of things that I do, and maybe you might want to try them yourselves. So anyway, those are a few tips from me for dealing with stress and anxiety. But hopefully you'll have a great day, and all the best to you. Thanks for listening. Bye.